I have in my hand a whole handful of things you can make buttons out of. And we'll pass them around in this little bag. But like here's mat board. This is the base for a clothespin doll. You know, that you buy at the craft store. It's just a little wooden circle you can buy at the craft store. I couldn't find any squares. They were out. But they make squares. But you can buy the wooden shapes in the little wooden department, usually near the paint in most of the craft stores. They come in a lot of different sizes. There's just 2 sizes. One of my favorites are the rings. The plastic rings you can get in 2 departments. You can get them in the knitting and yarn department, and this big one came from the upholstery department. Then there are different kinds of the things we're kind of used to. You know, the button, cover your own button with the back. There's 3 different kinds, and I don't have the plastic ones. I thought I did. This is a metal one that you just push the back into. They have a little helper piece. You know, you use your back of your hand to push the fabric so that it holds. And then there's this kind that have little teeth. And the ones with the little teeth I'll show you a bit later, because this is something that would be necessary. You don't use the little teeth if you have something you don't want to break on the outside of your button. You know, just look around. It's amazing the number of things that can make a button. I'll start with you. So the first thing I was going to start with is Dorset buttons, and I did this program a long time ago. And I love Dorset buttons. I learned how to make them, I guess, when I was about 10, because I made a sweater and I couldn't find a button to go with it. And so the ladies at the yarn shop say, oh, just make a yarn button. They didn't tell me what it was called. So you can make a Dorset button on a little plastic ring. And Dorset buttons can be giant. They can be smaller. These are small, and they're all covered with something different. This one is a variegated embroidery floss, a pearl cotton. This one is yarn from a sweater. This one is a combination of, it looks like 2 different kinds of thread and a metallic thread. This one's just yarn. And I do have a thing in here, I think it's on page 4, that shows you in detail how to make one. I'm just going to briefly kind of show you. To begin a Dorset button, what you do is you take a very long piece of yarn, probably about 2 yards. And what you do is you have your ring and you will hold it with the first tail to one side and then thread it in a needle, and you put the needle in the loop in the ring, and then you pull it through and you make a buttonhole stitch all the way around till it is tightly covered. Then what you do is you wrap, after you've put all the buttonhole stitches around the ring, you twist the stitches so that the little beads from the buttonhole stitch aren't on the outside anymore, they're on the inside. Then you take your yarn and you wrap it around. You can wrap it 8 times, 10 times, however many you want. You go from top to bottom, and then like from 2 o'clock to 7, and you can, and then 3 to 9. I can't tell time. And then you go up to like 10 and down to 4, and so you end up with a spoke. And don't worry, it's going to look really weird. Everything is not going to be in the middle. So then you just take your threaded needle and you start going from the back to the front and pull those spokes together in the center until you get it in the middle. Then you take a little X to secure it, and then you begin to weave in and out, over and under your spokes. And basically what you're doing is you're taking a little back stitch over each spoke, under and over. And you just keep going around, and you can fill the whole thing up with one color. You can not fill it all the way up. You can leave spaces. It's a matter of, preference. I brought some things. My mother just loved making Dorset buttons. So she made a sweater and she wanted a necklace. So she made buttons, and I let her in my bead box, and then I put the necklace together, and it looked beautiful with her sweater. Then she had a really good time. She decided she needed a bracelet for spring. So she made them all the same color on the outside. She wrapped some with some other embroidery floss. She put beads, French knots, all different kinds of things. So you can play and really have a good time. The ladies in Dorset, England used to make them for shirtwaist dresses and things, and it was very profitable for the ladies. That's how they could earn money at home. And then all of a sudden they started making buttons by machine, and then put them all out of business. The second one, I've always loved these buttons, and they're a braid button. And there's a lot of different kinds of braid buttons, but let me tell you, you can no longer go to Joann's or here and buy soutache braid. I found some actually in the ribbon department at Hobby Lobby, and it doesn't have the cord in it anymore. Generally, soutache braid is 2 cords that have a line down the middle. That is where you would sew it onto a garment. It also ravels like you wouldn't believe. It comes because of the cord coming out. If you put a little either fray check on it, or my favorite thing to do is stick a needle through it and wrap it a couple times, that keeps it from unraveling, and you have a nice little finished end. There are so many different things you can do with this. Is nothing but a ring that I have wrapped with soutache braid. Then the middle is the braid coiled up, and all I did was I put a pin through like a little snail part that I call the middle, and then I wrapped around using the pin as the base. And what you do then is stitch through from the back. You'll be able to see, I didn't put it back on here, to hold all those coils to keep them from popping out. But this coil could be a different color. It could also be another button. If your button isn't big enough, you could make, you could just stick the button in the middle. I didn't have a ring that nested inside. A lot of times you see the 2 braid covered buttons stacked. One is slightly smaller than the other, and you can glue those on top of each other. Now, when you make a button, one thing that I didn't say is it's important that you make a shank for the back, because you have to sew it on.
That was my question.
So you'll see when they come around. I didn't do any on the Dorset buttons. This one I did. I just used some of the braid on the back. This is another one. This is just the same ring. It's just wrapped with 2 colors. And the middle of this one is full of knots. I just tied knots, and they kind of made a string, and I just looped them around till they made enough knots to fill in the middle of this button. That one, you could also put that other button in to create a whole different kind of a look. This one on the second page is a button made out of a flat braid, and I think we used to call it midi braid. But anyway, I thought it was pretty cool. You can do this round or square. Now, before I found my plastic, this one is actually made over mat board. But the little button is just, oh, and here's the same button made with soutache braid. It's interesting how the size, the thickness of the braid makes a difference in the size of the button. This is quite thick, the soutache braid. But all this button is a square, and like I said, this one is mat board, but it could be wood, it could be a piece of quilter's template plastic, I don't know, piece of a milk carton, something that is sturdy enough that it can hold up to being wrapped around. And all this is the button is the piece of mat board is wrapped to this took 4 wraps to completely cover this little form in one direction. Then you turn it and you do the wraps completely around the other way. And you can use a little tape to help you hold it. I kept a needle and thread and I tacked it. Now this one has tape. This one is tacked. But the trick is to tack it so that it gets you going in the right direction. So like if you're wrapping, it's naturally going to try and scoot across. And so if you're tacking it, it will keep them from scooting around each other. So then you've wrapped one way, then you've wrapped at right angles. So then you come around and you have your nice big needle that you've threaded with this flat braid. And what you do is you go under, if I can get it to do this while I'm standing up, over and under and over, and it creates a checkerboard. And when you're done, if you then will go around and tack through just a stitch, so then the pieces won't slide off the sides. It's really pretty sturdy. I was totally surprised. I just love the way that looks. You can buy this flat braid in several colors. This was just a piece I had. So how simple is that? I know some of you knit and embroider, but there is a trick. This one is a yarn needle. If you have a big thread that you're trying to get through the eye of a needle, if you just take, instead, I've pulled more needle threaders apart. If you just take a nice piece of quilter's thread or a nice thread, make a loop, make it about 6 or 7 inches long, and make a loop, stick the loop through the eye of the needle, and then put your braid, yarn, or whatever, and then you can pull it through the needle. Now here's another button that was a cottage industry that went out of business. They're called singleton buttons. And I think what they were is for men's shirts. They were quite small. And it's a ring and just a piece of fabric. And with a singleton button, all you do is you make a circle of fabric like you're going to make a yo-yo. And then it needs to be 2 to 2.5 times the size of your ring. You do like you're going to make a yo-yo. You take stitches around the outside, and longer stitches, not huge stitches, but longer stitches make it gather better. Instead, tiny stitches make little wrinkles, you'll find in the end. I don't know why, But anyway, so after you've gathered around, you draw up the fabric around the ring, and you kind of take a couple stitches to anchor this in place. And then from the top side, you back stitch all the way around right next to the ring. And depending on how you want this button to look, you can take the amount of fabric that gathers to the middle helps support this center. If you want this center to stick up even more, you can take a little piece of felt or stuffing or something, and it'll give it a slightly domed kind of look. This one, I actually put a back on and did a bar tack or a thread loop across the back to sew it on with. With a singleton button, you can do a variety of things. You can do concentric circles of stitches. You could put beads in here. You could fussy cut a piece of fabric to be in the middle. And there's another example of having a covered ring and putting another button on top. So you can do a lot of things. I mean, it changes the way that looks completely. Also, if the button that you need is not big enough, you can do this to make the button a little bigger. A fabric covered button with all kinds of things. I had this old hanky, and I thought, you know, wouldn't that be cute on a little summer shirt? And so I fussy cut the circle to take the embroidery. And so I just covered the button, just a plain little button, with this handkerchief. We took a class on making beaded buttons. And this lady was amazing. These are all different ideas of hers for embroidering beads on fabric and covering a button. I didn't get very far, to be quite honest with you. Basically, what you do is you mark your circle of how big a piece of fabric you need. And so you then would bead in the center of your circle. And you can do any number of designs and styles. And this is just a bunch of beads, just random on here. Now this is where you need the button that has the little teeth. Because as you all know, when you make a covered button and you put it down in that little plastic cup, this wouldn't work. So you need to take a little line of stitching around your circle, kind of gather it in to help you get it evenly under the teeth, and then put on the back. And then the other thing you can do, and I don't have a sample of it, when you are going to cover a button, like with this one with the teeth, if you do silk ribbon embroidery, you can put like a beautiful flower or something on here that, you know, it just creates a nice detail.